This week on the Frame Savers, I like to spike! Welcome to the Frame Savers. If you're new to the podcast, we are a retro video game podcast that focuses on speedrunning. Speedrunning is a hobby where we try to beat video games as quickly as possible, using whatever tricks, glitches, and strategies we have available to us. And this is episode number 87. We're going to be talking about a new game called Mega Man 11. It's kind of retro because it's Mega Man, but it's also new, so it's a retro podcast still. Don't worry. And we are joined by our guest, MooMooAkai. Hey, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Good. So MooMooAkai joined us last second. Very, very kind of them. We're recording this before we head off to our holiday trips and such. And what kind of games do you run, MooMooAkai? Obviously, you run Mega Man 11. I think that's probably notable since we were having you on for that. But what else have you run?
I do a lot of Shovel Knight speedrunning, and before that I was doing Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze.
More like Spectre Knight world record holder in the Shovel Knight, which was episode number 80 just a couple of months ago. And you also run Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which we could talk about down the road, right?
Yeah, that's a very real episode for us in the future. We've got so many games that were made 30 years ago. It's sometimes hard to talk about games that were only made 5 years ago.
Yeah,
so
absolutely, it's like it's either got to have just come out or come out 30 years ago. That's our rule. So, but definitely check out MooMooAkai at twitch.tv/MooMooAkai. You can watch him run some Mega Man 11 and other games. But before we dive into our normal discussion, Chad, what have you been up to, buddy?
I have been no-lifing Monster Boy in the Cursed Kingdom. I've been playing that game nonstop since it came out. Me and Tina Hacks, we've both been basically doing races every single night. It's the new entry in the Wonder Boy / Monster World series, but I think due to issues with Sega licensing, even though they had the blessing from the creator to make another Wonder Boy game, they couldn't use the name Wonder Boy or Monster World, so they just called it Monster Boy, which seems like a really clever solution to that problem. But it's a really, really great game. I played it casually. Then I started speedrunning it, and it's been a ton of fun. What have you been playing lately?
It's been super cozy watching you and Tina race that every night, and keeping you both from your heavy reset tendencies and making you actually play through the game. It looks like a really cool game, and we did an episode on the Wonder Boy Dragon's Trap a bit ago, and it's similar to that, obviously, but it's much longer. It's definitely a fuller game. Not being a remake of a retro game, so it's been cool to watch. I've been doing a lot of Parasite Eve lately. I actually moved my way up to 4th on the leaderboard, so pretty exciting. I got a 247, so only 3 more times to beat, but maybe I'll try and get 3rd. That's kind of the goal. Had a lot of fun doing that. That's mostly been my focus lately. Other than that, I've been watching you and Tina race the Dragon's Trap game, so whatever, the Wonder Boy game, so that's been a lot of fun. But definitely been enjoying that. Maybe we can talk sometime. Do we have any events coming up here? We got GDQ for sure, but that will be not in progress. This will be releasing January 2nd. You'll have 5 days to gird your loins, as the Bible says, for AGDQ 2019. We're really excited. We're going to be there. We're going to be doing a panel if you're there on Monday at 4:15 p.m.
Yep,
Eastern
that's
Standard
correct.
Time. That synchronize your watch. Do people have watches anymore? Is that a thing?
No, but they do have cell phones. So right now, okay, sorry. Everyone put your phone very close to the mic. Okay, Google, set a reminder for Monday at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Hey,
Make sure you're there.
Have you seen that Saturday Night Live for the Alexa Silver for old people?
Oh my God.
It'll be recognized by almost any name. Hey, Alyssa, Odessa.
Yeah.
But definitely check out GDQ. It's gonna be a lot of fun. If you are going to be at the event, please come up and say hi to us. We will have stickers, I believe, a limited amount of stickers to hand out.
Yeah, an unlimited number of stickers.
An unlimited amount outside of the couple, like 200 or 150 we have. So definitely come snag one of those, get a card, come talk to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we've got RTA in Japan as well. That hasn't happened yet. As of us doing this right now, so actually that will have already finished by the man. There's just like not a lot going on. This episode's not coming out till January, I think. So
it's the perfect time to go back through the TFS backlog, listen to good 120 episodes. That's my call. That's what I think people should do. So this week we are talking about Mega Man 11, and do we even have to answer why Mega Man 11?
Why did they make an 11th Mega Man?
No, why are we doing Mega Man?
Oh,
11?
why are we talking about Mega Man?
Yeah,
I mean, I think an actual real honest answer to that question is that I am notorious for being the Mega Man hater, even though I'm not really a Mega Man hater. And I played this one casually, almost against my will. I was sort of roped into a blind race of it and ended up having a blast. So this might actually be one of the first Mega Man games in a long time I've really enjoyed. So
sure. I was excited, obviously, to have a new Mega Man, classic Mega Man release. It's been a hot minute since Mega Man 9 and 10
it was a
came
huge
out
break.
for the Wii. And I didn't play those on the Wii. I still haven't played those, and I don't actually know how you get those on a console. I assume you.
Nowadays, it's a lot harder.
Downloads.
It used to be you just download it from WiiWare.
I think I have one of the re-release, packages that they've somehow gotten me to give them money for all the Mega Man games that I own in 7 different ways. But since then it's been a while since a classic Mega's come out. I didn't know that this was actually happening until sometime within the past 8-10 months or something.
Yeah.
I'm sure other people have known a lot longer. I don't know, but cool to have that release. This is one of my 3 favorite series with like Zelda and Resident Evil, and I was really excited for that. What got you into Mega Man 11 and speedrunning it as somebody who doesn't speedrun classic Mega or anything? A lot of the Mega Man 11 runners are classic Mega runners, but you have this Shovel Knight background, which is kind of a Mega Man game. What made
kind
you
of
this?
They both got blue boys.
Yeah.
So one of my very first video games ever was Mega Man 8 back on the PlayStation. I remember getting it when I was just a wee lad, and
just beat that for myself for the first time like 3 months ago.
It's a beautiful game, great soundtrack, and God, it really stuck with me. I've been playing Mega Man games casually since, but I never really desired to speedrun the Mega Man games, except for the Mega Man 0, 3, and 4. When I finally got into speedrunning during one of Golden's 12-hour challenges, I tried running 0, 3. And yeah, they're all really fun games to run. They're just not something that I usually pick up. But I got into Mega Man 11 speedrunning because when I heard a new game was coming out, I was excited. I wasn't really like on the edge of my seat because Capcom's let me down before, and I was like, oh man, I just hope it's a good game. So I saw it, I played it. I was like, okay, this is actually a really good game casually. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait to watch the speedrun until I beat it. Beat the game, watch the speedrun. I was like, oh my god, what is going on? It actually strongly resembles in Shovel Knight for Spectre. There's a category called New Game Plus for all 3 nights, where you start the game back over and you have every single weapon that you got, everything, all your health upgrades and all that. It's kind of a mix of it's supposed to be harder and supposed to be easier, because like you have your whole arsenal, but you take double damage. Okay. And the thing about Spectre is that all of his weapons are really good. Like they're all very useful in a number of situations. For Mega Man 11, you not only have an entire arsenal of weapons that's really, really powerful, but you have the ability to access them on the fly. You don't have to pause the game. You can swap between them. So the skill ceiling for the game is like really, really high. and it's one of those games that, like, every time I go back to it, I can feel like I'm getting a little bit better every time. I never feel like, man, I'm at my peak, I'm just waiting for the perfect run to happen, I just need good RNG. No, I always feel like I can go back and improve, and new strats keep coming out. Like, it's an exciting game to be a part of.
For sure.
Absolutely. It's really fun to get in on the ground floor of a game. And, it's always hard for me and Chad to decide when we're going to cover a new game being released, something like Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey. If you may have noticed, some of those have not been covered yet. And by some of those, I mean neither of those. But, I think with Mega Man being a little bit easier to route and a little bit less of a lengthy game, this was a good enough time to start on this. You were also, I don't know, are we talking later about Twitch Rivals? Do we have a section
for
that?
sure.
Okay.
But that was a
Okay,
really exciting thing. Twitch has started doing, or at least has once and demonstrated the ability to showcase a little bit of speedrunning in their esports series, Twitch Rivals. So it was really exciting to see that happen. It seemed like they took a lot of names from the Mega Man RTA leaderboard in order to populate the list of people to be part of that. We were all very reticent, expecting Twitch to lean more heavily into big name creators rather than the top Mega Man 11 speedrunners, and it seems like they were very faithful to the desires of the community, making sure that the actual leaderboard and the actual top runners were represented well, and it was very exciting, so we'll talk a little bit more about that later too.
Absolutely. So we're excited to talk about this game. Me as a big Mega Man fan here, wearing my Mega Man Classic Mega shirt. Will I think this game measures up? Only time will tell, but let's go ahead and take a quick break, listen to the only song in the game, and then we will hop into the background.
So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Mega Man series, Mega Man is an action platformer, a pretty cool one too. We talk about a lot of platformers on this just because John and I are both very much platform speedrunners, with John having some definite exceptions to that rule, especially recently. But we talk about a lot of platformers, and I think one of the things that makes platformers very interesting is sort of the movement tech, but we don't really get to talk about combat all that much. And I think that what does make Mega Man shine is the way that Mega Man games blend combat and platforming so seamlessly as if they were just one thing. So this game came out October 2nd of 2018. It was released way long ago. It released simultaneously worldwide for PC, PS4, Switch, and Xbox One. And this was actually 8 years after the release of Mega Man 10 in 2010. So it's a very long hiatus for the classic Mega Man series. There were some other games that popped up in the meantime, some games for the DS, some of the smaller side series were fulfilled, but the classic series hasn't seen another game for about 8 years. And the Japanese title for this game is Rockman 11 Unmei no Haguruma, which is translated as Rockman 11 Gears of Fate.
I mean, I'll also just real quick step in. I mean, definitely Mega Man 9 and 10 are classic Mega Man games that came out, but this is the first game since 96 that was actually physically released as a classic Mega Man game. I mean, 9 and 10 were like WiiWare or whatever the heck they were released on. Like, this is an actual release from Capcom. I know it's not really, I guess it's not officially different, but it feels different in my opinion when you can go to the store and buy a physical cart of the game, or a disc or something. And so, I mean, it's been a long time since Capcom said, hey, we're putting some Mega Man in the store. So
I think that's actually a really good point. There was something about the release of Mega Man 9 and 10. While they were ultimately really cool games, they felt very different in their release. It felt like it was almost Capcom saying, I know you want Mega Man games, so here's something for you, rather than it really feeling like a full release. Does that make sense? Yeah,
I mean, it's like Mario Run coming out or something. I mean, no, I know it's not the same thing, but it's like you can't. I can't put Mega Man or Mario Run on my shelf. I can't, you know, if it gets deleted or whatever, I can't just like quickly get it back. It's, you know, I don't, you know, if you don't get one of the compilations or the re-release things, you got to do, you know, technical wizardry to go illegally download 9 and 10. Like it's
Did
not...
they re-release 9 and 10 for other consoles?
So this, I know on the Switch they have you know, these compilations where they have all the classic Megas on there. So like I think I have it on there.
Mega Man Legacy Collection, you mean?
Yeah, so I think it's on Mega Man Legacy Collection 2. Has like 7, 8, 9, and 10 on it. And they did the same with the X series as well. But that's not, you know, the way that, you know, you normally would get a game. You can't own the original 9 or 10 unless you have it downloaded. So, which is fine. That counts as a release, but you know, that's 22 years since the last physical time you could go to the store and buy a Mega Man. So that's kind of cool.
That's true. So, unsurprisingly, the game was published and developed by Capcom. And I think one of the really interesting changes for this is the first Mega Man game in quite a long time that did not have Keiji Inafune, who was, I think in many ways, really inextricably tied to the Mega Man series. He's worked on the Mega Man series since, I think, Mega Man 3? Mega Man 2 or 3?
I think 2.
And he was the producer of Mega Man 8, 9, and 10. So the fact that he was no longer on the team, I think, is a pretty important note. That's not to suggest that this game is any less a valid Mega Man or is worse for his loss, but it is kind of interesting that someone who is so closely tied to Mega Man is just completely absent from this. This is because he left Capcom in 2010 to start his own company. He worked on Mighty No. 9, which was a commercial failure largely.
And critical failure for the most part. I mean, I think the speedrun is really cool, but I think for the most part, casual gamers, you know, make it's the butt of many jokes. So didn't go out well for him. But Inafune did make the best Mega Man game, which is or didn't make the best Mega Man game, Mega Man 2 Game Boy. So, you know, he sat out that one. So I don't think him sitting out this one necessarily means.
So you're saying that because Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy was the best one, that it's okay that he sat this one out too.
Yeah, I mean, clearly he didn't know what he was doing because that game is pure gold.
So without Inafune, the producer for this game was Kazuhiro Tsuchiya, who was actually a programmer for Mega Man 7 and a producer on Mega Man Legacy Collection 2 in 2017. So they brought out someone who at least has some familiarity with releasing games for the Switch, has some familiarity with the Mega Man series as well, considering he's been working on it since 1996. I think that's when you said Mega Man 7 came out. So
that was 8. So
8. So it would have been even before that. I think it was
probably 94, 95 because it was Super Nintendo. It could have been.
He's worked on a number of other games, even as in a producer role, but I think this is his first mainline producer role for a Mega Man game.
95, by the way.
Gotcha. And the composer for this game is Marika Suzuki. Not a lot of Mega Man credits on her resume, but she has worked extensively for Capcom on a number of Capcom titles, including the Monster Hunter series. So if you're a big fan of Monster Hunter and you like their music, that might be why you like the music from Mega Man 11.
She did a great job of writing the song for this game.
John, I'm going to have to ask you to start putting the letter S at the end of the word song. So John, why don't you tell us a little bit about the classic Mega Man series?
Okay, well, obviously Mega Man's all about the lore. I've got the mangas in my room. The manga is plural of mangas? Mangas?
No, the plural of manga is manga.
Manga. Okay, whatever. Well, I have manga. I have many manga.
I have all of them.
2 of them. I have only 2 of them. But there is more lore in those than the games. The games obviously aren't story, but the one thing that this game does do is it does a lot of story. It does some voice acting, and it really reboots the series, kind of.
Oh boy, does this game do voice acting.
Yeah, I like the voice acting quite a bit. I really like the art style, and it has a lot of these cutscenes. And unlike Mega Man 8, which I know you love, Moo, the voice acting is much better than Mega Man 8. The storytelling is much better.
You don't like Dr. Wowie?
Yeah, I mean, I do love Dr. Wowie, but this is actually like objectively good as opposed to so bad it's good. But Mega Man is a humanoid service robot who volunteers to save the world from Dr. Wily, who has modified or brainwashed other service robots to do harm. Him and Dr. Light, the creator of Mega Man, work together as scientists, and Dr. Wily and him had some differences in opinion. Dr. Wily decided he wanted to kill everybody and destroy the world, and Dr. Light didn't like that plan. And so that, I guess you have decided you don't like that. So Mega Man has the ability of essentially taking on a enemy's signature power and being able to use that. And so that's kind of his robot role. I don't remember in the lore exactly why that's his specific ability. Like, I mean, obviously all the other robots can't pick up the same abilities as other robots.
Yeah, I don't know what the actual lore is for that. I guess it would make sense for Dr. Light to be responsible for incorporating those powers into Mega Man's programming.
I think when Dr. Wily, from what I remember, and this is something we probably should have looked up, but I believe when Dr. Wily starts trying to do bad things, I think Dr. Light programs him to be able to do that. I think something like that, from what I remember. And so this adds a new part of the story, or brings a new thing to the table, which is the double gear system. So during his days studying alongside Dr. Light, Wily devised this creation called the double gear system that pushes robots beyond their normal abilities, but he was forced to stop due to the danger that it posed to the robots. And so finishing the double gear system, Dr. Wily steals 8 robots, increases their abilities in order to take over the world, and so Dr. Light is left with no choice but to go ahead and just give up.
No, not give up.
Sorry.
Never give up.
He installs a prototype for the double gear system in Mega Man to help him on his mission to stop Dr. Wily. So that's obviously something that's new to this kind of reboot, I guess I would say. Like, you're seeing cutscenes and story from Mega Man 1 essentially in terms of plot, but with some of these rebooted aspects, and it's Mega Man 11, it's not I guess labeled as a reboot, but it kind of is. I mean, I don't know how you would classify.
So what are you saying is a reboot? Like
Mega Man 11 is a reboot of 1. I mean, the story is the beginning story of how all this happened. All the other Mega Mans progress in the story, and this goes back to the beginning with Dr. Light and Dr. Wily, but it adds this double gear system mechanic, which kind of makes it like all the Hollywood reboots that exist today. I mean, I think so. I mean, it's the exact same story. But
so you're saying that this is like the episode 1 of Mega Man games?
100%. Am I wrong? Am I crazy?
But as long as we're clear, when I say episode 1, I mean Star Wars episode 1.
No.
And I don't know which character is Jar Jar Binks, but now I'm gonna work that out in my head.
It's like all 7 of the Spider-Man movies that are the same movie. It's like, let's do the thing. Oh, Uncle Ben died. Oh no. It's like, okay.
By the time this episode releases, I think the new Spider-Man is going to be a very popular movie. So I think you got to watch what you say.
Who, with Tobey Maguire, The Rock, or
no? There's no.
Is there another one going on right now? I'm not even being sarcastic.
Yeah, Spider-Verse.
So stupid. Stop making the same movie. Goodness sakes! How many times do we have to see this?
This one's different.
Get killed.
All right, this is not an episode on the Spider-Man movie.
We'll wait for my review for me to continue my emotional frustration here, but the gameplay is obviously your standard classic Mega Man, but this game does have 4 difficulty modes, which is cool. You have newcomer, casual, normal, and superhero. Always nice when, I think modern games have realized, one, there's a huge breadth of, play talent and abilities out there. People who have never played a Mega Man game played this game, and people who've been playing them since 87 have been playing them, but also it just gives a lot of replayability in terms of being able to go back, try it on normal. And this game has 8 robot masters, which is pretty much the formula for most Mega Man games outside of the original Mega Man game. Mega Man 1 only had 6. But you got Block Man, Fuse Man, Blast Man, Acid Man, Tundra Man, Torch Man, Impact Man, and Bounce Man, and they each have access to 1 gear. What does that mean exactly? Yeah,
so in the lore, Dr. Wily is using this gear system in order to enhance these robot masters, but each one of them actually only has access to 1 of those gears. So different ones, for instance, Bounce Man has access to the speed gear, so there's portions of the fight where he speeds up incredibly fast, and really the only way you can keep up with him is to turn on your own speed gear in order to keep up with him. And then, for instance, other bosses might have access to the power gear. So Blockman, for instance, has a phase where he turns into a giant statue that you have to fight against. Or Impact Man turns into this giant robot that you have to avoid because he's invulnerable during that period. That's them turning on the power gear. And so each one of them has access to one or the other gear, and the way that they use them in the fight is unique to those different fights.
Yeah, I guess I should have said I was too confused at the fact that there actually is another Spider-Man getting made, which I actually did not know. But the two gears that we were mentioning before are the speed gear and the power gear. So the speed gear lets everything slow down so that, you know, you can, I guess, make really precise platforming for one, but also...
Well, to be accurate, it makes you faster and your ability to make decisions faster.
Okay.
But the way that plays out gameplay-wise is it makes everything around you seem to slow down.
Like Inception.
No, not like Inception, like the speed gear from Mega Man 11.
Oh, okay. And then the power gear allows you to deal more damage, essentially, for a short period of time. And so each boss has either the speed gear or the power gear they can use against you. And so this is the new mechanic used along with, you know, your normal slide, jump, shoot with your buster, and shoot with the weapons that you pick up from the different bosses. After all 8 bosses are defeated, you do 4 Wily stages, and then you have a final boss rush, as is customary in the Mega Man series, and then the final fight against Wily, who's always in a spaceship with a skull on it. And, I mean, that's just what the guy...
Do you think Wily thinks he's in the right? Because a lot of times you don't see the good guys using skulls as their symbols. So he has to have some sort of self-awareness to realize that he's the bad guy.
I think the guy went to a spaceship dealer. He got one spaceship with a skull.
The dealer says,
and
all
then-
I've got's a skull. Are you okay with a skull? He's like, well, I guess if I gotta.
He clearly is utilizing some sort of warranty loophole here to continue replacing this spaceship with the same spaceship. And that's the only reason he doesn't get a new design, is because he doesn't have to pay for the new ship. That's what I'm assuming.
We're just gonna have to start a brand new podcast. This one's done. It's over. We just need a new podcast.
Fair. Well, you should probably get someone who's not me. So this game also utilizes the shop, which is something that does happen in a bunch of other Mega Man games as well. Like Mega Man 5, Game Boy has a similar mechanic, and I think Mega Man 8 does. I don't know about 9 and 10. I haven't played them. But you can purchase lives, E-tanks, M-tanks, which refill your weapon energy, W-tanks, which I believe refill both, and then you can get these upgrades, which they have similar ones in Mega Man 5, ones that will automatically apply weapon energy, for example, to your weapons that have no energy in them. So generally, if you had full weapon energy and you got a weapon refill, it would just go, it wouldn't do anything. But this will go ahead and automatically put it into a reserve weapon, stuff like that. And so you can constantly take these bits from different levels and go spend them to get upgrades. Which
there's a lot of
neat.
There's a lot of neat upgrades here too.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Beat pulling you out of pits, spike shoes to make it so that you don't die if you jump on spikes, little things like that are real quality of life improvements. If you have the bits or the bolts to pay for them. But it's really nice that they do that, because I think even playing casually, you'll find that sometimes you'll get walled off on a level in a way that is fairly traditional for classic Mega Man games. But you can just go to the shop and buy a ton of lives, for instance, enter the stage with 9 lives and take it on that way. I did that a lot in my casual playthrough, where I'd get walled off somewhere. I'd just farm for bolts for 2 minutes and then go to the shop and buy more lives than I could possibly hope to use.
I would argue it does make the game a little bit too easy, but it's also, I mean, in one sense, it's not essential. Like, you don't have to do it, but in another sense, like, if it's there, you're going to end up doing it. You know what I mean? I don't know. But I think I found it did make the game a bit easy.
I mean, the game does have a wide variance in difficulty as well. So, I mean, if you're playing on casual mode, the game gives you constant checkpoints pretty much everywhere through every stage. Normal mode gives you, like, 1 or 2 checkpoints per level. Superhero mode, you basically, what is it? You get like 2 lives per level or 1 life per level, something like that. I don't.
Right.
Superhero mode, I actually haven't dabbled with too much, but I know that they're they're the opposite of generous in terms of checkpoints, lives, damage you deal, and damage you take.
Right.
The game wants you to suffer.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the game's pretty generous from what I remember with the checkpoints, which makes it a little bit easier in general for the levels. But it makes sense that as you up the difficulty, it would maybe remove some of those checkpoints and create a little bit less balance. But then again, I'm probably not the average Mega Man player, since I have speedrun some Mega Man games, and I've beat beaten so many of them and like them. So my judgment on how hard it is might be a little bit skewed.
I'm more responding to your comment about the ability to buy lives, making it a lot easier. I think this is more akin to the way that Capcom is really starting to allow you to customize your experience for Mega Man. Just like you're able to pick your difficulty with a lot of granularity. I mean, it wouldn't be unusual for a game like this to have 2 difficulty modes. Mega Man 2 has 2 difficulty modes, famously, normal and difficult. But this really lets you dial it in. Do you want a lot of checkpoints? Do you want a lot of lives and drops? Do you want no checkpoint? And so the ability to let you use the shop however you want to use it. Do you want to stock up on lives? Do you want to buy some tanks? Do whatever you want to do. I think that's really what this is more about.
Yeah, I feel like Mega Man, part of the Mega Man experience is kind of banging your head against the wall to get through a difficult level.
Sure.
So just to be able to bypass that, like, if you can bypass it, of course you're going to, because you don't want to bang your head against the wall. It's bad for you. I've talked to doctors about it. And so, you know, you can go ahead and skip that, but then you're kind of missing some of the authentic. It's like getting less spicy Indian food. You know what I'm saying?
I guess that's true.
It's not a bad way to put it.
But I mean, you know, we're in 2018 or 2018. It's like, I think we're sort of past the point where games have to be needlessly hard just because that's the way they've always been. And I think that's really what this is.
We're just coddling the next generation.
All right,
They're
old man.
avocado toast, beating all their games, and then watch out. The next World War, they're not going to be able to step it up. You know what I mean?
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
No, I think it is good, and it does help for accessibility. It's just hard to, if you do dive too deep and buy all of the upgrades, the game becomes very easy. So it's like, and some of them you can't turn off, I don't believe. So like stuff like increased drops and the refills and stuff like that. You can power up your weapon, I believe.
All I'll say is that I consider myself an above average gamer, and I really needed lives to make my way through casual mode. So
yeah. No, that's fair.
It was still pretty challenging.
I believe the game does ramp up a large amount in difficulty after the normal stages,
right?
Like the Wily stages, or I know, at least listen to, here's an organic plug, Warp World podcast. The Warp World historians talked about this game recently, and this was Grand Key's first Mega Man game he had ever played. And
nice.
he said he breezed through all 8 robot bosses, even though he never played a Mega Man game, and then hit the Wily stages and was just hitting a wall. So
that's the Mega Man experience.
Yeah, so I guess I'm wrong. I don't know.
So the real new mechanic that this game introduces, that I think really does help to separate it from the classic Mega Man formula, which I think there's a lot of people out there who love the classic Mega Man formula, but I think a lot of us are interested in seeing some new ideas. And so the new mechanic here is what we've been talking about the whole time, this double gear system. And a lot of the game is designed around this idea. So the speed gear allows you, at least gameplay-wise, to slow down time, which can help a lot with dealing with either overly complicated sections or places where you need to outrun something. The power gear allows you to make your attacks more powerful. And that's not just making the numbers higher. So when you shoot, it doesn't just make your shots slightly more powerful. Even your robot master abilities take on a different form entirely. So every single one of those abilities has a power gear variant of it that does something completely different under that context. And I think that's what really opens this game up to having a lot of variety.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's a new idea, because that's, go back to our Mega Man X episode. That's really when Mega Man introduced the whole charge up your, boss attack, and now you get a new, different ability, whether it be the Ice Sled or other things. But it does provide a decent bit of variety for a Mega Man game to, give you basically 2 abilities per ability you get, which is cool. And some of them are really useful in this game specifically.
So rather than having a certain number of charges or uses of your gear system, you basically just have a single, let's just refer to it as a heat meter, a cooldown meter, that as you use your gears, the use of it builds up this meter, and once it fills up, you go into a cooldown mode where you can't use any of the gears until it's entirely cooled down. What makes this game a little bit more unique, playing off of this concept, is the double gear system. And what the double gear system is referring to is, if you are low on health, you can actually activate both gears simultaneously and go into double gear mode, which makes everything slower and makes your attacks much more powerful. It's meant to be sort of a last-ditch desperation move, but the side effect is that you are locked into double gear mode. You can't turn it off, and it will force you to overheat. And once you're overheated from double gear mode, not only do you have to wait for it to cool down, which it's going to cool down much more slowly, but also your buster is in a very weak state. So once you've used that, it's a very, very much desperation move, because once it deactivates, if what you've been attacking isn't dead, then you probably are after that, because
Yeah,
all of
the
your shots are
cooldown-
very weak.
The cooldown system's really similar to Azure Striker Gunvolt that we talked about in the past, which has a similar mechanic where you can use certain abilities up until that meter, goes all the way down, and then you get negative effects from that overheating. So you're always kind of trying to balance using the abilities without overusing them, which is cool. I think the levels in this game in general are designed around the gear system, which is really cool. A lot of sections where it's very beneficial to slow things down or speed them up, whatever you want to say. Because you're getting chased by something, it'll give you a very clear situation where slowing it down and kind of wrapping through a path, is much easier and clearly intended, the quote unquote intended way of doing it. So it's cool that they did a good job of level design or mechanic as well. I didn't really use the double gear mechanic much though. Did you? I didn't use it once, I don't think. It's too risky.
I had a couple situations casually when I would actually use that, and it was partly to test it out, but also because I realized, I just need a little bit more, and this boss is like really thrashing me right now.
Moomoo is a gambler, that's why.
I mean, my first time fighting Blockman, I was like, God, what do I even do about this guy? Like, is he actually? And Blockman was actually one of the first times when I was playing the game, I realized, like, wow, they actually designed the game around using the gears.
Mhm.
Because I'm not really sure what you're supposed to do if you don't use the gears at all. It's really, really difficult. I think it's too difficult without using the gears until you know some other strats. But like, it's definitely it was definitely evident throughout the entire game that they were like, you really want to use these. Like, they'll not just make it like easier, but like manageable. And it's still not like way too easy.
No, but I think that's a really good sign if you design a game where it's clear that you're gonna use those things instead of kind of they're a novelty but you can bypass them. It's
Right.
some games, they'll add a new mechanic and it's like, okay, it's there, but you might not use it, or you can use it a couple times. But this game like clearly steers your hand in one direction, and it's usually pretty obvious what it wants you to do. But
A lot of people
builds
complain
good
about it being gimmicky, but I think this is just sort of level design built around a concept, which is actually a really good way to design levels. Is, you have an idea in mind of how you want them to play. Certainly give them more options than just the one, but it's also sort of nice to see levels that are really built around this idea. It would have been very easy to just say, okay, we give them the ability to power up and to slow down when they're in trouble, and just let them let players use it in combat when they need to. But to actually build levels around the idea is really interesting.
Yeah, I have plenty of criticisms that I will be bringing up later about this game, but this is not one of them. I think it's really hard to think of a new gimmick or mechanic for a game that's this beloved and established, especially after such a long, hiatus away from making games. And I think the double gear system is a really solid decision in that realm. I think it adds enough gameplay value to feel new and fresh, but it also still fits in with the Mega Man formula, and I think they did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, that's
fun
what...
miscellaneous facts. Oh, good.
No, go ahead. Go.
I was just gonna say, Tundra Man makes reference to Cossack Robot Laboratories or Laboratories, however you want to pronounce it. And Dr. Cossack is the boss of Mega Man. I thought just 4. Is he in 5 as well?
So in Mega Man 4, I guess if you're not wanting Mega Man 4 spoilers, then plug your ears. But he's the antagonist in Mega Man 4. But then you discover later that Wily put him up to it. He's
what were the odds though?
What's the word I'm looking for? He not ransom, but he's basically holding him hostage to do this. And so once you basically uncover that plot, he starts developing Beat. And Cossack develops Beat and gives it to you in Mega Man 5, so that's where he shows up in Mega Man 5.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Yeah, Mega Man 4, big twist at the end. It's not Cossack, it's actually Dr. Wily.
Well, it is Cossack, but it's Cossack by proxy.
Real quick, how does Wily keep getting out of jail? What kind of prisons are in this world?
Does he ever actually go to jail? I'm not.
He does
up
at the
on
end. The end, like it'll show a newspaper going to jail, at least in one of them.
Because in a lot of them, he just sort of like runs off in a spaceship, and it's like you did all that damage, and you couldn't maybe like hold him there with like Webman's web or something.
Yeah. I mean, there is no Webman. It was
like work
try.
it out.
I mean, it's definitely got to be. I'm surprised there wasn't a Webman. They've done 9 different
for Mega Man 12.
We need a Spider-Man. That's what we need.
They should make a new Spider-Man movie.
Okay.
Okay.
We're not going back there again.
Off the rails. So the reception for this game, so this got an 80% on Metacritic and 7.5 out of 10 on IGN. Mega Man 11, here's the quote, sticks so close to the established formula that it wouldn't have made much of a splash if it had come out in 2008 or 1998. In fact, it has more in common with 1996's Mega Man 8. That seems pretty critical.
It's not glowing praise. They also said that Mega Man 11 is a good foundation for the next 10 Mega Man games. So it seems like while they're saying it's not necessarily groundbreaking, after an 8-year hiatus, you might be expecting a little more. This is a pretty good sign of what's to come if they're going to continue working on the classic series, which I see no reason why they wouldn't.
If this continues the way that the Spider-Verse is continuing, we'll have Mega Man 12, and then Mega Man 13 will be a Mega Man 11.
GameSpot, GameSpot gave this a 7 out of 10 and said, it just feels good to see Mega Man back in action, and Mega Man 11 will hopefully be the start of many new robotic adventures to come. I think the general sentiment here is that a lot of people aren't finding it necessarily revolutionary. If you're not a Mega Man fan, there may not be a ton here for you. It's very similar to some of the older games in the series, but it is a fantastic addition to the series.
It's kind of like if a show were to go off the air for a few years and then come back and you're like, well, maybe it starts, the first episode, it's not that great, but it's good to see the show come back, and I want to see, it shows potential for what they could do down the road. And I think this is kind of like, okay, Mega Man's on, these next-gen consoles, or these modern-gen consoles, whatever you call them, and, we've been waiting forever, and it seems like a formula and something where this isn't going to be a one-and-done situation, so it's nice to have it back, but it's kind of a first step, I feel like, and I think those quotes are really telling of kind of how I feel about it as well. Sales figures sold approximately 300,000 as of this recording, which I think is okay. I don't know anything about sales.
I compared it to the list of all the Mega Man games. So Mega Man 2 is the best-selling Mega Man game of all time, with 1.5 million copies, but that game's been out for 30 years, so I'm not sure exactly how sales work after its original publishing from the publisher. I imagine that digital sales are still incorporated into that in some capacity.
Maybe. I mean, if so, that thing's sold on Virtual Console like a billion times.
So this game's only been out for 2 months, so sales could certainly continue to improve. And based on the entire Mega Man franchise, extended franchise as well, this puts it in the top 30 or so games, which doesn't sound like all that much, but sort of where it fits in there is with games that were pretty decently received. So I guess this information would be more valuable if we saw it, maybe a year from now, see how it sold as the Switch continues to mature, as more sales are made on Steam, things like that.
We haven't even seen our first holiday season with this game out, right? I mean, Christmas is coming up.
Exactly.
And that'll probably boost sales quite a bit for a lot of these Switch titles, especially the newer ones. So, I mean, we'll see. But I think, it's definitely one that a lot of people picked up as soon as it came out. So people were excited to see the Blue Bomber back in action. We're going to go ahead, listen to the Mega Man 11 song that exists, and then we'll come back and do our review.
You can't keep getting away with this. So before we start doing our actual review of the game, I think it'd be kind of interesting just to talk about our blind playthroughs. We don't often get an opportunity to play through a game blind that's not explicitly for the purpose of doing a podcast. And so I think we had relatively organic blind playthroughs, me and John, and I imagine MooMooAkai had the same experience. So just how was it for you guys? Did you have fun? About how long did it take you? That sort of stuff.
What Chad means is generally when we're doing these podcasts, if we have been playing through most of the games that we do, but it's usually for the purpose of the podcast, whereas both of us played this casually just as it came out because we were excited to see it, not knowing when we do an episode. Actually, probably expecting not to do an episode for a while because we're pretty cautious about that. It took me about 4.5 hours. I don't know about you. I just pulled up my video on there, and I'm remembering it being easier than it probably was now that I look at that time, because earlier I was saying it may be a bit easy to be able to load up on the lives and all that, but it definitely brought some of the Capcom difficulty as well. I think you played it on casual. I think I played it on the normal mode.
Right.
I played it on a little bit harder of a mode. And so it took me a bit, but I enjoyed playing it quite a bit. I have a lot of criticisms that we'll bring up later, but the initial playing of it, I didn't feel those the way that I probably do now. It was nice to play Classic Mega again. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I played on casual. It took me about 2.5 hours. For the obvious reasons of me playing on casual, I didn't feel like it was overly difficult, but a lot of that was just due to the ability due to my ability to just stock up on lives whenever I would get walled off by something. I think I had some trouble with some of the initial Wily stages. The early Wily stages really demand that you have mastered a lot of your abilities in order to get through them smoothly, and I just hadn't. I was sort of winging it a lot and slowly figuring out how to master different pieces and parts of it with my different abilities, but it was a ton of fun. I played it because I got roped into a race with my good buddies Smite and Psychedelic Eyeball, and they wanted to play it because it was brand new, and I said, sure, why not? I actually ended up having a lot more fun than I was expecting to. I don't agree that I am a Mega Man hater, despite what the viewers say, but
what the billboards say out there on the streets.
Yeah, despite what I advertise myself as, I don't believe myself to be a Mega Man hater, but I certainly my mouth is not agape at every single Mega Man game. So
no, I mean, every time you've had to play a Mega Man game for the podcast, you've said the same thing, which is, you weren't really looking forward to it, but you always enjoy it well enough. I think people probably think of you as a Mega Man hater because you don't speedrun them, even though you speedrun everything else, and it's just not your type of platformer, right? I mean, it's not the kind of game you want to speedrun, but in general, you've always been very positive about the Mega Man series. What was your experience like, Moomoo? Obviously, good enough to run your first Mega Man game as being Mega Man 11, right?
Yeah. So when I played through it, I mean, I'd had all that, from my childhood playing, and then Shovel Knight was still, fresh in my mind. So I approached the game. I was like, okay, I want to see what their intended experience is going to be like, because I feel like game developers should have, a difficulty setting that they expect someone to play at. And it kind of saddened me when I saw that there were 4 difficulties, so I just stuck with normal, because I wasn't sure what newcomer and casual would have. I wish that was conveyed a little bit better. But as far as like playing through normal went, it definitely was. It hit nostalgia really hard. Like I was like, yeah, this is definitely an old Mega Man game. It's hard in certain spots. It doesn't feel particularly fair in certain spots.
Sure.
But that's what I kind of expect when I think of like what's an old Mega Man game like, and that's what it really hit me as. I was like, yeah, this is a pretty good recreation of what old Mega Man games are like. It doesn't feel painfully punishing, because they have a lot of modernizations. The shop is very generous. You can shop between game overs. You keep all things collected when you die. So like if you get stuck in one section, like Arthur Blues was saying, you can get a bunch of bolts from there. I didn't even realize, like sometimes I would just go, randomly to the shop, see what's up, and I'd be like, how do I have all these bolts? Jesus Christ, like I'm loaded.
Don't you wish that happened in real life, where you went to the store and you're just like, whoa, where'd these $3 million come from? Oh,
every time you go to the store and you don't have enough money to buy something, eventually more pennies just show up in your pocket.
That's what happens to Wily. That's why he keeps buying all the Skull spaceships.
Oh my god.
I thought
I would definitely be disappointed if I played a Mega Man game and I felt like it was fair all the way through. I will say that out there. So I'm okay with it being unfair, but that's because I'm I don't know, a masochist, or I don't know. You're right. That's Mega Man, right?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I definitely, I was like, you know what, that's cool. I kind of, I guess I'm kind of spoiled by all my years with Shovel Knight. I feel like because Shovel Knight has its one difficulty, it just presents its difficulty to you through each room. Mega Man still does that, but it does have spikes. Some rooms, and I literally has spikes. Like some rooms are literally just really, really hard to get through. They're trial and error, and I don't feel like that's the best design anymore.
Sure.
But it's still, it's not bad for its Mega Man. It makes sense being in Mega Man.
Absolutely. So, what was either of your favorite part of the game playing through it?
Oh, that's tough. Well, I know what my least favorite part is, so we'll get to
You knew
that.
it was coming. It's right there on the notes, bud.
Yeah, I know what's coming. I'm just when I think about the different parts of this game, my mind immediately goes to the intensely frustrating pieces and parts of this game. I really did enjoy, I believe it was the Fuse Man stages, the Fuse Man stage. I remembered really enjoying that part of the game. I thought Acid Man stage was really interesting. There is a lot of variance throughout it where there's some really straightforward platforming where you're trying to stay up and out of water that doesn't instantly kill you but can damage you if it progresses in its acidity. And then there's sort of the classic Mega Man parts where you're just in these rooms that are filled with nothing but spikes, and you're trying to get through those without touching any of them because they're instant death. So
how did they make those rooms without touching the spikes? That's what I want to know.
oh wow, do you think they had special spike handling gloves?
They have to. And just
Why don't
carefully
you
lay them
why
down.
Don't you just get those? And
Yeah, I was gonna say, because if those exist, then Dr. Light should be putting those on Mega Man.
Maybe they're real expensive. I don't know. I will say one quick complaint about the acid stage. People are colorblind, man. I
Yeah,
don't know
that's
what yellow and green. I don't know what the difference is. It matters with the acid. One of them
Yeah.
is good and one's bad. I don't remember which because I can't tell which one's which. So.
Yeah, it doesn't start. I'm not 100% certain that I recall, but it doesn't start damaging you until it gets red, right?
It only damages you when it's green.
Oh, it's the other way around. Okay.
Yeah, and there's yellow though as well, I think.
Yeah,
Right.
It goes blue, yellow, red, then green.
Got it.
And definitely for people with any type of color blindness, that would not be.
A lot of modern games are starting to do a colorblind mode, and this game did not have one.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't. It doesn't to my like. I haven't checked through options in forever,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of it. There's like a lot of games have accessibility options. I didn't think I saw a colorblind mode for this one.
Okay.
My goal was not to be in the acid. It felt like it was already acid, so I probably shouldn't be in it. The stage was called Acid Man Stage, so I felt like I was probably not willing to risk it.
I felt like the game didn't communicate what the colors really meant. Like I had assumed that red would be bad because red is bad often, and so it wasn't really clear to me what colors meant what. So
yeah.
I didn't know that only green would damage me until casually when I was playing through that level. At one point, I got stuck in the water. I was like, "Help! Get out!" And there were no enemies to hit me, so I wasn't in iframes. And I was like, "Oh, this water doesn't hurt." But then, it turned into acid, and I was like, "Okay, now it hurts."
Yeah, kind of confusing. Yeah, it doesn't convey that too well. I would say my favorite part, one, the graphics. I really like the upgraded graphics. I think they did a really nice job of keeping that classic Mega feel, but upgrading it to 2018. And I thought that it just looked sharp. All the levels look different. And it's just a really well-designed game graphically, I think. I think all the bosses look good. I think the backgrounds, the levels, just great. And I really like the cutscenes as well.
I was super happy about them not going with like the 16-bit graphics again.
Yeah, I think it was nice that they didn't go full retro style, but it still feels like classic Mega. It's not like they went a full-on like try to get more realistic or do anything crazy. And the cutscenes are really well animated with really good voice acting. So just like all of that together makes like a really nice, pleasant experience, I think.
Whether you can call the voice acting good or bad, it's enjoyable.
It's way better than like Mega Man 8.
Oh, for sure. Not even close.
I actually thought it was solid, but I mean, I'm no voice acting, critic over here. I don't really know like what good acting is or good podcasting, but like in general, I thought it was good. And the cutscenes were really nicely animated. It reminded me a lot of like the old cartoon, and it was good nostalgia feels.
Visually, visually, one of the biggest things that stuck out to me, and one of the reasons why it's actually one of my favorite stages, Torchman with the fire chases.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
there's to me a lot of games will hook me in, with gameplay. That's like a big reason why anyone will keep playing a game. But you'll really grab me a little bit harder if you have solid music, aesthetic, or some type of way of getting me emotionally involved into a game. And when you get into that's those sections. They have, those filters that look sweltering. There's lots of smoke.
Yeah.
You see lots of blue. Everything looks really, really hot. And then they have that giant wall of fire, and everything kind of lights up because of it. And you feel like even if it's not as tense, those sections are actually hard, first of all.
Yeah.
But then you see that giant wall of fire, and you're like, that doesn't look fun. I don't
Yeah.
want anything to do with that.
They're very
On top of that-
stressful, but in the right ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are another good example. That's like the perfect example I think of the power gear or the speed gear being designed around a level. Like,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
clearly the point is when you're running from the wall of fire to use the speed gear, and I think the speed gear and power gear mechanic is a nice addition as well. What about least favorite parts?
Bounce
So
man.
I was just gonna say bounce man. I don't think any room where you're forced to bounce has ever been good game design.
You already messed this up in Mega Man 8 with Clown Man, and they're like, let's try it again. It
Yeah.
didn't work again. You got to stop trying it.
Yeah,
The bounce?
it's pretty
Oh.
frustrating.
And there's hands that slap you across stuff.
Oh,
Also not
God.
a fan of those.
The bouncing mechanic itself, like I thought the stage was like it's got good design elements to it, but the bouncing itself is not communicated properly to the players.
Mhm.
Like I didn't know at first that when you hold the jump button, you'll start rising, because there were times when you would brush up against it and you just kind of get rejected off of it. And then there are certain rooms where you'll just get stuck until you found like a magical pixel to start bouncing off of that'll let you progress. Otherwise, you'll get stuck infinitely in some spots. So there are a
Which is
couple
bad.
of rooms that are really bad.
Yeah.
I feel like it is well designed for having that mechanic, but it's kind of like making a good recipe, but like you have to put worms in it. It's like they did the best with what they had, but they still got worms. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That is a metaphor I'm gonna take with
Yeah.
me. I think that like constant bouncing can be designed well, but I think that there's too many rooms in Bounce Man stage where you can lose all of your progress with one bad bounce.
Mhm.
And I don't think there's really much that's more frustrating in the world than losing progress. It's one of the reasons why I think that Nintendo Hard exists, because it's so classically frustrating when you've made it through 6 out of 8 stages in a game and you lose that last life and you have to start the whole thing over again. It's like I've already demonstrated proficiency at these levels. You're just asking me to do it all in a row.
This
So-
game does a lot of that. I mean, I think Bounce Man's clearly the number one example of that, but there's a lot of different sections where you're platforming and things can knock you off, knock you down to the beginning of that room, or into a pit, obviously. But I mean, a lot of those in the speedrun are bypassed by using rush in certain ways, but they're pretty difficult rooms throughout the game that
Mhm.
just force you to lose progress, that are frustrating. I would say my least favorite part is what I was going to say, Bounce Man as well. I think that's clear, but I was really disappointed by the music. If you haven't been able to tell by this, I liked it at the time when I played it, like it was fine. But going back and watching this speed run and just listening through it, like they use one song or two songs like a lot, or a lot of them sound very similar. But like Rockman / Mega Man is supposed to be like around music, right? Based around rock music. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what the series was named after. The classic Mega series is one of the best soundtracks, in any of the NES library. Mega Man X picked up right where it left off and was killing it. And it was disappointing, honestly. It's not bad. It's definitely decent music, but it's not very rocky, and it's not very catchy. Like, I can't remember one song. And similarly, like the bosses, like none of them really stand out as being memorable. Like, I'm not like, oh yeah, remember Impact Man? It's just they're all kind of generic and a little bit too similar to other ones. I mean, that's a really difficult problem for the Capcom to figure out. They've made so many Robot Masters at this point, but like I don't know how many more fire / flame / explode men you can make / Iceman / like it's all just the same thing. And I don't know, none of them really just stood out as like interesting to me, I guess.
Also, they forgot to include Proto Man, or Proto Man.
Proto Man.
He's been in every single game since Mega Man 3, and they forgot to include him in this one.
Some people kind of thought that like Proto Man and Bass might show up as DLC. Who knows?
Hmm.
That'd be kind of neat.
Maybe the point is you are Proto Man.
No, you're Mega Man. What are you
Proto
talking
Man
about,
was
John?
with you all along.
Okay.
I thought the music was disappointing for sure, though. I think it's good music. I think if it were in any other game, okay, that's. But ultimately, when you have a game like Celeste that came out this past year, I mean, that's the level I expect from like classic Mega, and I mean that's a high bar since that's probably the best soundtrack I've heard in years. But you go back. I mean, both of our outro songs for this podcast are from Mega Man 2. NES, and I don't know, it wasn't just the quality of it, it was just they seem to reuse a lot of different audio samples and a lot of different songs. Moo was pointing out earlier, all the boss fights have the same music. It just feels like in 2018 you could do better than that, and yeah, I was disappointed. I think they could have done better.
Yeah.
They didn't really sorry.
No, go ahead.
They didn't really change up much of the instrumentation between all the soundtracks, and they did have if you pre-ordered the game, an instrumental version of the 8 boss stages. Those are also okay. They're not great. They all had to grow on me just because I've been speedrunning the game. Otherwise, casually, I was kind of like, yeah, I can't really remember much about it. Like there were a couple moments, but nothing you can really hum or whistle, and that's kind of a big problem, especially in a game like Mega Man. It has to be like super, ear catching. Like you have to be able to think about it throughout the day.
Absolutely. I think they just kind of dropped the ball a little bit there. Were there anything about this game that makes it stand out from other games? I mean, I think we've kind of covered for the most part that it's Mega, but the double gear system makes it stand out from classic Mega. But anything else?
I really like so they have this by default on consoles, and then they kind of have it by default on keyboard. It's not such a huge prevalent thing, but for like comparing to the other Mega Man games, when you switch your weapon, especially in the older Mega Man games, the only way you could do that was through the pause menu. In Mega Man, I believe 7, 8, and up, you could switch with L and R. So they had little bindings that you could just rotate through, and they were on a cycle. They have a
Right.
set order, and that's how you get through your weapons. And that makes it great in those games because you can always on the fly, and you get some interesting and cool looking strats that wouldn't save time if you had to go through the menu.
Sure.
But in Mega Man 11, they have the right stick, which they'll assume is on basically every controller. And if you can remember which direction you have to press, you actually immediately swap to a specific weapon. You have a weapon select wheel, and that allows you to do some really crazy, complicated tricks within a single second.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's actually pretty cool. I mean, that wouldn't really be a quality of life upgrade for casual playthrough, like
I had to
the
turn it off
spinning wheel
casually.
is.
I had to turn it off.
Yeah, you would have to, because you're not gonna pick the right thing, right? I mean,
Well, it wasn't just that. It was just if I even slightly
Accidentally,
touched that, I would change power-ups constantly. So
That happened to me when I was playing on the Switch. I was constantly brushing up against, like, no, I didn't want that.
Yeah, but that's really cool for the speedrun for sure, and for somebody who maybe grinds out the game and plays it a lot, even casually, maybe not speedrun wise, that can be really useful. I don't think it stood out outside of the double gear system, and honestly, like I really did like again the cutscenes and the dialogue. It really did feel like a nice homage to Mega Man 1 and kind of re-showing that game from so long ago. We kind of talked about places the progress was snagged, especially Wily stages and some of those difficult to fall down stages. Could you see yourself playing it again? Obviously, Moo has said yes and has probably played it thousands of times. What about you, Chad?
yeah, I definitely could. I think if I were to ever pick up a Mega Man game, I've always said Mega Man X would probably be the one I would pick up. But this is definitely a strong contender. It's a really, really interesting game to play. The quick weapon switching makes for some really amazing strategies. I mean, for me, replaying a game is mostly going to be centered around speedrunning it. But even casually, I could see myself playing it again.
I don't think I could see myself playing it casually again. It's going to be a long time before I do, probably. But for speedrunning, I could see it being kind of a casual speedrun. It doesn't. There's just nothing right now, at least, that shouts to me like you have to play this again. With all the games that I want to play, but I mean, I'll always go back to any classic Mega. So I guess at that level, I would. But I'm not sure. I don't feel the siren's call right now.
Sure.
So, recommend or not, this game is $30, which I think is a really good price for this game. I think if this had come out as a $50 or $60 full release price, I would have been really disappointed. I think most people would be in 2018 with 5-hour playthrough time. But do you recommend for $30 people go buy this?
Mm-hmm.
$30 is a hard price for me. So, How Long to Beat says that even if you're pretty slow at the game, it's not going to take you more than 8 hours to beat it. So the question is whether or not, even for the slowest of players, do you feel like $30 is an appropriate amount of money for an 8-hour game? Which I think that maybe our idea of what games are worth is very much skewed by 2018, where games are becoming longer and much more involved. For a Mega Man game, I think it's really, really good. And I think that if it were on sale, I would say yes. But 30 is kind of hard for me. I would still say yes, ultimately, but with the caveat that it is a very short game. So take that into consideration.
It's tough because even if this game were garbage, in my opinion, I would buy it for $30 because I'm a semi-collector, retired collector or whatever, and I love Mega Man, and so like I like owning it, and I think it was worth $30. I think the question is just, you're talking money. I'm thinking just more time. How many games do you beat a year? Because if you're the kind of person who only has time to beat 4 or 5 games this year, like this game's not making that list, in my opinion. But if you're somebody who plays,
this is a tough year to go up against. So
yeah, I mean, if you're looking at Octopath Traveler and Celeste and some of these games, the new Monster Boy, all these things, I think there's other stuff that you're gonna get more out of. But if you love classic Mega, I think you will also really enjoy this. So
I'm gonna ultimately say yes. This is a recommend for me.
Yes as well.
But I just have to provide the caveat that it is a relatively short game, even by Mega Man standards. Just because I think if you up the difficulty, you'll get your money's worth. But if you play it just on its easiest mode, I think you may not find that you did.
As a final just review thought, I have derided this. I do recommend it. I think you should play it, especially if you like classic Mega. But I mean, I really was thinking about kind of just this movie reboot kind of culture we have lately, and it does feel like that to me. It feels like let's play off the nostalgia, and it's nice that we've got another classic Mega, and I do agree with the IGN and GameSpot reviews that it feels like a foundation for something further to come. I just wish they could have taken more risks with it and done something more interesting. I don't know what the answer is for that. If I knew the answer for that, I wouldn't be working the job I am now. Like, it's really hard to take something like Castlevania and Mega Man or something like that and, make it feel new and also change and make different. But look at the other huge Nintendo series that have come out the last few years, like Mario Odyssey was an amazing new Mario game that felt way different. Breath of the Wild killed it, and like this just feels like they didn't feel like taking any risks, and that kind of stinks in my opinion. Kirby doesn't do anything new either.
I can understand it to a certain extent. It's their classic series, and there's a formula that classic Mega Man represents. They take plenty of risks with some of their spin-offs, for better or for worse, but. Sure. I can also understand the need to play it safe, and I'm glad that we did not just get a classic Mega Man game, but they also implemented, hey, check out this double gear system. I think that's even, in terms of what classic Mega Man has represented historically, that is itself a risk. So
in terms of how much I expected it to change, it did change a decent bit. I'm not surprised at all, but I'm just saying when you look at how Mario, at how Zelda, and then this relates in my mind to like Kirby, where it's like Kirby hasn't really found a way to like make its gameplay experience anything new or unique for a long time, and that's what it feels like. I would be concerned about Mega Man going down the road if they keep going this path. So we'll see. I definitely think it's cool that it came out. I recommend it if you got the time. But we're gonna go ahead and listen to that one Mega Man game song from Mega Man 11, and then we're gonna talk about the speedrun.
So, what sort of makes Mega Man 11 interesting as a speedrun is the fact that there are so many different categories. And while one category has really seemed to emerge as the main category, no out of bounds normal, there are out of bounds tricks that can be done. And so there is a separation on the leaderboard between out of bounds and no out of bounds runs, as well as the 4 different difficulty modes gives you a total of 8 different categories that you could potentially run. And Mumu, I know that for a lot of people who have watched Mega Man 11, they probably haven't seen any of the out of bounds really, because it seems like everyone has completely latched on to the no out of bounds run. But can you explain a little bit about what out of bounds is actually possible in Mega Man 11?
Yeah, so Mega Man 11 does something that I've seen firsthand in Shovel Knight. 2D games like that, they will try to they'll implement something called blockers essentially, that prevent you from leaving that room unless if you leave it in the intended way. They'll have doors, ladders, whatever. They want you to leave the room in that way. But you can, in some rooms, essentially do things that the developers didn't expect you to, and they therefore left those blockers out. So you can do this in Blast Man stage, but also very notably in Acid Man stage, where you can cut like almost a minute out of the run. You would essentially get over a wall and then use the impact's weapon pile driver, which allows you to move vertically, or move horizontally. So you could just fly over walls, and there are all kinds of like, I'm not an expert in that, but essentially you'd be going really far out of bounds until you found another spot where you could enter the stage again. And then the camera is like, oh, you're over here. It'll pull the camera right to there, and ta-da, you're wherever you are, and you skip the whole chunk of the level.
That's really, really cool. Does it require you to find a screen transition, or can you just like fall into a room?
You can fall into a room, and there are certain rooms where the camera will just recognize that you're there. But for the most part, you should be hitting a screen transition, or maybe it's not as clear. But sometimes game devs will leave screen transitions like almost infinitely in a certain direction, because they just don't expect you to. So like in Shovel Knight, for example, there is a screen transition that goes all the way across the bottom of the screen, but half the room is covered in lava, and they obviously don't expect you to go through the lava, but you kind of can.
Sure.
So if you manage to safely fall through the lava, you just end up in the next room. And that's a cool trick in that game. But essentially, yeah, I think that's what happens in Mega Man 11 is some rooms just have really long screen transitions that
Right.
just get triggered as soon as you cross them.
Okay.
The thing about blockers is no one can block Blockman.
Okay. I knew we'd work that one in somewhere.
I
So
don't know
the-
if there
It
are
was
any...
like a C minus, but it got in there.
Yeah, so the world record for this game is actually 33:41, and that's by QTT6, who is a Taiwanese runner of the game. He's very talented. He actually participated in the Twitch Rivals tournament, the same one that you participated in, Mumu, and he got a world record during that one, but he has since improved it, if I understand correctly.
Correct.
So, I mean, obviously this game is way too new to have had any GDQ appearances, but perhaps even bigger than a GDQ appearance is this Twitch Rivals event that happened. So can you tell us a little bit about what that actually was?
Yeah, I was completely surprised by that. That was super cool. So essentially, I was contacted like 3 weeks before the event happened, and I'd only been running the game. That was basically the same day I submitted my first runs.
Oh,
Lucky
wow.
you.
I was kind of grinding the game out like really hard, and I was like, my plan was like, okay, maybe by December I'll have like a decent competitive time. And they were like, hey, so you want to be in this thing, big prize pool, top 20 runners, it's gonna be on Twitch. And I'm just like, I gotta get good really fast.
Yeah, so I
So
imagine you were
yeah,
probably playing around the clock at the time.
oh my God. So for those 3 weeks, I streamed every day between 6 and 10 hours.
Wow.
That's a ton of work.
Yeah,
I mean, it,
that
it clearly
is.
paid off because you're actually quite high on the leaderboard now. You have a really, really respectable time. The world record's 33:41. What's your PB right now?
It's currently 35-32, I believe.
Right.
And I always feel like that's kind of embarrassing for me because I kind of compare, my PB to my sum of best, and my sum of best is actually about a minute off of the world record. So I'm just like, man, my sum of best isn't even close enough to beat the world record. His is like down to the lower end of 33. I'm like, oh, I got a long ways to go. But
Right.
a lot of people also look at my time and just like, wow, you improved a lot. And for that, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I put a lot of hard work into learning really difficult strats as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
How did
amazing.
you do at the event? Did you come home with the big cash money?
So it was a $25,000 prize pool, and first place got 5,000, and then it broke down from there. I walked away with 900 at ninth place.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah, I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
$900 for playing Mega Man 11 is not bad.
Oh yeah, that was $900 for 4 hours of work, right?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean that I'm not a mathematician, but that feels like that's a pretty good pay rate.
It's at least
Oh yeah.
$20 an hour.
Yeah.
So what wound up happening was top 5 runners were all under 35 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I was hoping to get under 35 as well. But what wound up happening is runners who placed between 6th and 10th were all within 10 seconds of each other.
Oh wow. That's really tight
So-
competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, that last, like when they were like, okay, guys, you have right now to start a new run, and that's it. And everyone who started then could have moved up a place
Sure.
very
Jeez.
easily.
So that's
So-
kind of similar to the speed gaming format that we've talked about a few times. There used to be a speed gaming league where essentially you'd get 30 minutes to get a run off the ground for a certain goal. It wasn't full game runs because you only had a short period of time to learn the game. But there would always be this countdown of, okay, if you reset now, it's your last reset. And so you'd have to kind of gamble in your mind. Is it worth finishing this run, or should I go ahead and try and start a new one with the risk that I choke it right in the beginning and die or whatever. So that's kind
We
of cool
don't-
to see that format
We don't
come
talk about a lot of tournaments on here. We sometimes will point out when one is happening, but we don't do a lot of coverage of it. But it's kind of interesting to see more and more events starting to adopt this sort of format. I've talked to people before about how I don't really find the single double elimination format appropriate for speedrunning because what makes a good run isn't something that can always be produced at the drop of a hat. So getting one shot at it is maybe not always appropriate. So this format that Twitch Rivals used and Speed Gaming League used to use and some other events have started to adopt of here's a block of time that you have and just do the best you can in that block of time, use it however you want to, but whatever the best run you produce within that time period is something that I think really plays to the strength of a lot of speedrunners. Allows you to be a little bit reset heavy if you'd like to, be a little bit conservative if you like to. It allows everyone to, work within their strengths.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing because it's like speedrunning is kind of a performance art in terms of you're looking at a finished product, kind of like if you were to listen to like a studio musician's like, here's the song that we put out, and then doing a tournament is kind of like, hey, play a live show right now, and you got to nail your notes to do this, and so doing this type of format kind of gives a little bit of both. Like you have to obviously be good enough to do it in that session, but you get a little bit of that leeway where it's not one mistake, one RNG. Just completely destroys your ability to show that you maybe are better than someone or can compete at that level. So it's kind of a cool compromise, I feel like.
I'm
good.
Sorry. I actually, it's kind of funny because so the way they formatted the whole thing from the start was I threw this up as a suggestion and they liked it, so they took it. But everyone was kind of under the impression, okay, so we'll just have from the start, reset as many times as possible. I said, hey, why don't we all just do a single race, no reset at the start, And they were like, yeah, that'll be great. And then we can all, do kind of like introductory commentary for the whole thing. And that's, to me, that's my strong suit in like a no reset style. That's what I've been doing a lot of. Like if Speed Frog, he challenged me to so many different random races, and it's like, yeah, I don't have any time to learn this category, so I'm just going to do what I can to survive on a first run. And on that first run for Twitch Rivals, I actually had a 4th place time. So I was like, yeah, I feel great. Okay, awesome. And then it just kept going down from there. I was like,
Yeah, more people finally sneaking in their high caliber runs. I think that's really amazing. You definitely see that a lot with that format where people will challenge themselves to do a no reset up front to kind of set this is the time to beat, and then they reset if they can't beat that one. But I think ultimately it's really exciting that Twitch is starting to not necessarily give attention to, because Twitch has been surprisingly generous to, I think, the speedrunning community historically. But it does seem nice that they're really starting to highlight the speedrunning community in new and interesting ways.
Yeah, it seems an audience is building, I think, for events like this. That's probably how I'd put it, because I think Twitch has been very supportive of speedrunners, but I think the community is finding ways to kind of take this performance art race thing and kind of like build events around it. So we'll try and be on top of maybe announcing these a bit more, and you can always check our Twitter and stuff, but hopefully we'll have some cool stuff to come. Diving kind of into the speedrun tech here, before we get into any of these strats, can you just talk about the fact that a lot of people run this on keyboard, which is definitely a big difference in terms of Mega Man games? I mean, most Mega Man games are obviously played on a controller. This game was released on Steam, world records on keyboard. A lot of the top times are on keyboard. Can you talk about kind of the advantages, disadvantages of that?
So yeah, keyboard. This is something that's like, it's in a good spot in this game. I feel like it could be better. I always wish that game companies would be a lot more forthgiving on how you customize your controls. For keyboard runners of this game, they have the very lovely access to any weapon at the touch of a button. So unlike when people play on console, it's something I definitely struggled with casually, was selecting a weapon very specifically without accidentally swapping it, without accidentally dequipping it. Keyboard runner could just, they press a button and that's the weapon they have. They don't accidentally anything. It's just you press the right button and there you go. Playing around with the sensitivity on the control stick was a big issue, and it's something that a lot of people who are controlled or are used to controlling Mega Man in a more traditional way, they will struggle with that if they stick with the controller. But then again, learning how to play on a keyboard, that's also pretty difficult. But keyboard gives you all those options. It lets you, pick any button to do anything for the most part. There's a couple of restrictions on the keyboard, which kind of suck. There's certain buttons that you can't change the binding of, and certain buttons that you can't bind to. The game also doesn't let you change menu bindings. So if you're used to controlling Mega Man with like WASD, you have to go and use the arrow keys to do anything in the menu, because that's what they don't want you to accidentally soft lock your game, essentially.
That makes sense. Yeah, changing your binding so that you wouldn't be able to modify or manipulate the menu anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting point, though. Most people who have run any Mega Man game obviously have not run it keyboard before, so it is a big adjustment. You can look at the leaderboard and you have people Prissy and is it Fanta? I don't know how to pronounce their name.
Fast at CC.
Fasta. But they've been running classic Mega for a long time. They've never done it on keyboard before, right? So like that's, if I don't know if they run on keyboard or not, but that would be a huge adjustment. I mean, I've tried to play platformers on keyboard before, and it's
hard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do it. I mean, before I got into speedrunning and I would revisit some of my favorite classics, I'd play them on emulator and I'd play it with keyboard. And at the time, it didn't seem unusual to me. I just got used to it. But now the thought of playing any of these games with a keyboard just blows my mind.
Yeah, I've tried it with, okay, I just want to learn the timing for this one trick. Let me pull up emulator. I don't want to get my converter for my controller and get that, and I'm just like, I can't even move left to right. It's just so foreign. So that's kind of a weird wrinkle to add into this for sure. Getting into the notable tech, do you kind of want to talk about some of this movement tech in the game? I think the biggest thing is that first level, obviously you go to Impact Man and get his weapon, and that's a huge boost in terms of your movement abilities. How does that work?
So the Impact's weapon, Pile Driver, allows you to fly in the air, do it on the ground, and it deals a certain amount of damage. Specifically, it deals basically enough damage to go straight through a lot of enemies. A lot of enemies will just immediately die to it. And in terms of speed, it is essentially always optimal to use an Impact Pile Driver over even ground sliding. But there are certain areas where you'll want to conserve it because you don't have enough ammo to just use it forever. The easier difficulties actually basically let you do that. So I think Newcomer essentially lets you just impact the world. But on normal, you have to very specifically calculate. And one of the cooler things about it, one of the things that makes it exciting as a speedrun to me, is once you get past that entry level, then you start looking at, okay, well, weapon drops, ammo drops out of enemies, and this enemy does drop, and this one might drop a big one, and if you get it, it's like, well, what can I do now? What are the extra things that I can impact over, or which sections should I hold off on? So there's a lot of, critical thinking you have to make. It's not...
in terms of, I've got enough weapon energy, I can pull off this strat now. That's always fun in a lot of Mega Man games, but...
I mean, we didn't talk about during the casual, but this game actually makes rush Coil and Rush Jet very accessible. And while Rush Jet may not be the fastest way to move, the ways that you can combine Rush Coil and Rush Jet with the rest of your arsenal is actually very interesting. I mean, you'll often see quick switching between Rush Coil to get height, and then Rush Jet to push yourself up, and then Impact to move sideways. And I think one of the things that makes this speedrun really fascinating to watch is you can see one room played with 6 different weapons over the course of the whole room, because just every single step you take has a different weapon that plays to that location's strength.
And the more optimal, you know, the top runners are using a large combination of, like Chad said, versus, you know, I mean, you watch somebody learning the run, they're going to use some of them, but when you see them really chain together at a high level, you're chaining those 2 rushes and the impact, it can be pretty.
Yeah, new strats keep coming out, which is the great part. Is just what may be optimal today. Maybe someone sat down for a couple hours, and you can literally, like, I have had plenty of stream sessions where I get stuck on one stage and I'm like, I want to see what I can do here, and I'll open up Discord and I'll see Reeves will have a new strat for this room, and it might save a little bit more time, or maybe it requires more RNG. He'll come out with things that are usually like more expensive on ammo, and it's like, if you have the drops, go for it.
Wow, that's cool. So you would say the pile driver has a pretty big impact on the run?
Yes.
Well, you might say that. I wouldn't. I actually heard you talking during your stream. You were playing this before we started recording it to sort of, you know, get in the spirit. And Reeves was in your chat, and you were talking to him about how very often he will come up with strats that are just as fast, just as challenging perhaps, but gives you sort of variety for how you can do things. And I think that really plays into your previous point about, you know, at the highest level, you start to route in, okay, well, what do I do if I have more ammunition for this weapon, for instance? And having 3 different ways that you can tackle the same room that all have the same probability of success, or maybe the same difficulty, that's where you start to say, okay, how much ammunition do I have for each of these weapons? What's the best choice right here? Making those decisions on the fly has to be really challenging.
It's super addictive. Like, I love it. If you look at, for example, like Blastman's stage, Reeves is on the PlayStation, by the way, and the leaderboards are all separate based on which console you play on. So Steam runners can't view the Nintendo Switch leaderboards, and I can't view the Sony leaderboards. And I can look at what the best Steam runners are doing, but if I want to know what Reeves is doing, I have to watch one of his streams or one of his highlights. And when I've seen one of his runs, I'm just like, oh, you impact there instead. Well, what do you do in this room? In a room where I normally impact to get over all the hazards and obstacles, and he'll do something else that manages to get through without using weapon ammo, so he can use it elsewhere. And I'm just like, oh, cool. So if I ever accidentally use ammo, or if I didn't get any drops, then I know what to do in that room.
Just to clarify, when Moomoo is saying that the leaderboards are separate, you're talking about online, not in terms of speedrun.com.
Correct.
Yeah, the in-game leaderboards.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that in case that maybe.
Yeah, there's a time attack mode, right?
Usually.
Yeah, that's super nice, and it's a super robust mode.
Can you actually view, like, for a given time, can you actually watch a replay of it?
Yep, you watch everyone's replay played through your game. There are some desyncs, but only the people who have actually hacked the game have desyncs. Like,
okay.
If you look at all the top runners, like if I recognize their name, and I go and look at their replay, it plays out perfectly fine. It's got some really great stuff that I can study from.
So speedrunning is just getting mainstream here. You can just go ahead and watch it right now on your Switch. That's awesome.
Oh yeah.
That's got to be really exciting, you know, if you're a casual player and going into time attack mode and saying, well, how are people playing this, and just being able to be wowed on your game.
Mm-hmm.
It's also cool just as a speedrunner, kind of having your name like in like the Switch database. I don't know, like obviously like your random person doesn't know about speedrun.com, but if they own the game, they might, you know, see you there. So
that's such a modern thing too. I think it was when was it Tropical Freeze? I think it was the original DKC Returns got re-released, or Tropical Freeze got re-released. I remember this mad rush for the leaderboards, people trying to get their names up there, and people would post screenshots of those leaderboards with, you know, here's, you know, Spike Vegeta's name, and here's this person and this person. It's like, it's all like, people we recognize.
Even with Odyssey, it was like that. It was like whoever gets the most jump ropes. So like everybody was trying to get on the jump rope leader. Like all these little things would be posted in like the time trials, and so speedrunners were trying to get put on there, which is cool. In terms of other weapon abilities, you also have the Tundra weapon, which is pretty significant. I've been told it can freeze enemies in its tracks.
It does a good job of that. Although it
Wow.
also
It's really giving me the cold shoulder with these.
You can't
Very
keep getting
icy.
away with this, John.
Very icy disposition going on here.
Please save us by telling us about Tundra Man's weapon and how it plays into the strats for this game.
So Tundra Man's weapon, and this plays into the gear system. Tundra Man's weapon by itself is a pillar of ice. It'll hit things above you and below, which in its natural state is pretty good. It deals a fair chunk of damage, and it's got great screen coverage. But when you use the power gear, it is a blizzard that covers the whole screen. If you think of like Astro Crush or from Mega Man and Base, I can't remember what his name was, but there's an electric weapon that does from a Dynamo Man, I think. It covers the whole screen with thunderbolts and sparks.
Okay.
So that's the way they brought that weapon into this game. And the reason why it's so useful in the speedrun is because it normally wasn't used against bosses other than Torchman, who that's his weakness, is Tundra. But it also happens to deal instant damage, so it just like it immediately slaps the boss. And because of that, we have faster kills on Blockman and Blastman. Basically, the way bosses work in this game is they have, just like every other Mega Man game, they have iframes when you hit them. And this iframes are invulnerability frames, are a period of time where they just won't take damage. So you have to carefully pick and choose how much damage you deal to them and when you do it. And using Tundra Man's weapon to just immediately cover the screen, it means that we can kill them that much quicker because they are immediately in iframes, and then while they're doing that, we can set up for our next more useful attack.
Gotcha.
That's really chill.
Stop. John.
I mean, if you were to list the best attacks in this game, this would be the winter.
We can't talk about speedrunning because of you, John.
Okay, so when I asked you a little bit about glitches in this game, I outside of the out of bounds, there doesn't really seem to actually be a lot to speak of. But you did mention that there is a lot of exploitation of the gear system, and I think you can see this in speedruns because a lot of times it seems like there's a preference to avoid as often as possible, for instance, the speed gear, because actually gameplay-wise it slows you down as well slightly too. But the power gear actually seems where this is playing into the speedrun a lot more. So how is the power gear really useful for the speedrun outside of just dealing straight damage?
So when power gear activates, it changes what a lot of weapons do. That gives us new ways of attacking, new angles of attack. It's not just a straight up power game, because some enemies won't die to a single hit from a power geared version of a move anyway. So we have to pick and choose what we're going to throw out. But for example, with Torchman, if you use a power gear version of Torchman, the move comes out slower, but fires 3 shots at 3 different angles. So we'll use that like maybe at the beginning of Blockman stage, for example, and we'll use it at like the beginning of the room, and then we're just keeping up with that one shot that we want to hit an enemy. And then like later on, yeah, it'll get something that's in our path. So it's a way of altering what our weapons do. And then we get to use them in other unique situations. There's not a single weapon that's bad in the game. Like even Acid Barrier, that you would think it's just a shield. It doesn't really offer much. It's actually the strong weapon against Dr. Wily, and it basically 4-shots him compared to sitting there for like a minute bustering at him.
It is nice when you do a Mega Man speedrun to have use for a large number of the weapons or most of the weapons, because a lot of Mega Man speedruns do come down to always use this weapon, like the Metal Blade and such. And obviously Pile Driver is pretty predominant in this, but there also is a lot of use for the fire attack, for the Tundra attack, for the bombs. It's really cool to kind of get a little bit of usage out of all those. I also noticed in QTT6's run, he does use the speed gear a couple times to make certain really precise jumps and such. Does it manipulate those at all, or what's his reasoning behind those?
So the speed gear does 2 things. Apart from slowing down enemies' movements, even though you're also slow, you technically move maybe a little bit faster than you would normally. So it allows you to beat certain things. Like if you were to, and this happens in Impact Man's level, there's a room where you're trying to get past these 2 wheel enemies, and there is a very small window of opportunity for you to get behind them as they hit a wall. So if you use speed gear as they hit a wall, you can actually jump between them and a platform, and it's very small, but it allows you to beat that. There's that happens in a couple of other stages, and it's just you don't need a lot of it, but you just need
Yeah, they're
enough
very
of it.
small taps of using the speed gear that are like you can see is just so optimized. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, clearly, if you know the nuts and bolts of the gear mechanic, everything's gonna just be moving like machine work.
I'm gonna start a brand new podcast. I can't do the same. This is why we don't talk about Mega Man, John. He's been saving this for so many episodes. He's just been working up all of these Mega Man related
Listen,
puns.
I know you want all of our conversations to be robotic here on the Mega Man podcast. But...
Okay, on the Mega Man podcast. So, without getting too much into sort of a tutorial, let's talk a little bit about some of these bosses and what makes them really interesting. And I think for a lot of these bosses, especially the ones who have the ability to use the power gear themselves, they have these pretty wide open spaces where they're relatively invulnerable. And so the quick kills play a much more integral role in the speed run than it would for some of the other bosses, for instance, where if you miss a hit or you mistime something, you can clean it up easily. For instance, Blockman, if that fight goes wrong, he goes into his giant form, and that's probably 30 seconds you've lost, right? That's a massive amount of time. So let's talk a little bit about some of these fights. What does the Blockman fight look like for you as a speedrunner?
So Blockman, I mean, originally is just like a really painful fight to deal with. Bosses all have HP intervals where they decide, okay, I'm going to do something. It's essentially a desperation move, something really strong that's going to help me win the fight. And with Blockman, you actually skip that. You specifically deal damage to him so that he is like just over that amount of health. And then the last hit you deal is a fully charged Red Buster that just obliterates him from half health to nothing. So the first half of the fight is just setting that up. And then right before he transforms, boom, you just release a super powerful shot that destroys him.
Yeah, you
So it's
lose
all
a
about
considerable amount of
skipping
time
phases.
if you don't get that because the transformation it takes a lot more time to take down, right? I mean, it takes a bunch of hits, and he's not the way he moves. He's only vulnerable when he's in a certain part of his movement. And so I've just noticed runners that are not at your level, save a lot of time if they can get that quick kill, but if they don't, you can tell how much time.
Well, I mean, I remember a bunch from the commentary from Twitch Rivals where you'd see a runner on really great pace and they go into the refights, for instance, at the end and go up against Blockman, and suddenly he goes into his giant form, and it's like, well, that's the whole run right there. You've led up to this point where you've just lost any opportunity for PBing. So
that's what's frustrating about having refights in a game like this, where you've got a tight strategy like that. Like, you got to pull it off twice. At least one time you can do it early in the run, but you can't do it. You can't do the boss rush early. So yeah, that can be frustrating.
I think the refights add an interesting sort of twist. There, a lot of times you can talk about speedrunners who really rely on heavy resets because, maybe they're not consistent enough to pull off the strats every single time, but all you got to do is get most of those strats to work out all in a row. Refights demand that you have the consistency as well as the skill in sort of a really interesting way. I mean, if you're the sort of player who you can pull off some really tough strat one time, that's great. You can probably pull off most runs. But for Mega Man, you got to be able to pull it off twice. If you can't pull it off twice, then it's nothing.
You have to be consistent with the boss fights. Because like you said, I mean, it's a lot easier when okay, I'm going to start off with, this boss. And if I fail it, that's an early reset point. But it's, you're talking always 30 minutes into the run. You got to be able to beat all of the bosses in a row optimally. So
it's interesting if you think about it, because I mean, the appearance of refights in a casual playthrough is really, if for nothing else, your final opportunity to use the powerful weapons against those bosses, right? You finally now have that boss's weakness. You can now use it. In a casual playthrough, your first time through, you might not have had that weapon. In a speed run, rather than those refights being meant to be easier, it's kind of harder because it's a sticking point for pulling off these really crazy quick kills a second time. So.
And if you're down, your health isn't getting refilled all the way up to the top, each time. So you're generally having to go into the fight maybe with a little less health, or you maybe can't be as aggressive. So it's an interesting mechanic in all the Mega Mans. What other bosses stand out in terms of just their, execution? Something interesting if someone's watching around and want to see something that they would find fascinating.
I would think that. So I'll pick on Blastman right now. Blastman is actually a fight that has changed up a lot. New iterations of that fight keep happening. They're all difficult. There hasn't been a new one that's just like, oh God, thank God it's free now. No, no, they're all just a different kind of difficult.
Yeah, that really
Okay.
And
blows.
the that one almost went over me.
Oh yeah, I missed it too. Oh man.
So Blastman was actually specifically sort of rerouted fight-wise because it's one of those fights that I said before had Tundra introduced into it. Tundra makes the fight faster, but now the original way we did the fight had damage boosts. So the original difficulty of the fight was, okay, I need to space and hit him in specific ways. Now it's like, now you have to do it damageless, and you really only have one shot at it, because cleaning up the old fight was easy. I basically always had him at like just a couple hits left, and a single torch attack would finish the job. Now, if you mess up the beginning of the fight, I'm just like, help! I'm chasing him down. It's super awkward. Like you can lose a lot of time now, and it only saves like half a second.
Oh wow.
Of course,
That's
that's the way it is. You know.
You've
Find
also
a
got
half
the
sec-
Yellow Devil back, which is an infamous boss of the Mega Man series. First appeared in Mega Man 1, and then I don't think appeared in a Mega Man game again until Mega Man 8.
Yeah, that was the
And
green
then-
one.
So this is the third appearance of the Yellow Devil, but one of the most iconic Mega Man bosses. Kind of cuts into a bunch of different pieces and transports across the screen. One small little Easter egg, if you probably a lot of people aren't aware, but the pattern is exactly the same as it is in Mega Man 1.
Oh
So
really?
if you have speedrun Mega Man 1, as I used to do, then it's the exact same pattern as Mega Man 1, which is kind of a nice homage. But what do you do to do that quickly?
So, yeah, well, first time I got up to him casually, he definitely destroyed me. I was like, yeah, I never fought the original Yellow Devil, and I can see why people remember him because,
Mhm.
man, not
Yeah.
forgiving. But for runners, we actually used Blastman's weapon, and we use it in a way that isn't normally used throughout the run. Normally, when you and this is actually another kind of cool control thing is this game allows you to have a rapid fire buster button,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of classic runners think is kind of controversial because they think it's like,
Mm.
oh, that's easy mode. You just have to hold a button and it fires really, really fast.
I was
But
wondering
actually,
that
it fires faster than you could possibly humanly mash.
100%.
I've
When I
tried.
was watching the speedrun, I was like, either this person is a god masher. I was like, there's got to be an auto button, and I kind of remember that, which I don't know. I personally am not a big fan of mashing in speedruns. It's also not really great for your hands, so
Mhm.
I have no issue with it. But I can understand the
It's
people who have run Mega Man 2, Rockman 2, and are gods at that game partly because of mashing. They don't get that advantage.
hmm It's an interesting point as far as like, is skill tied to your ability? Because it is a skill, but it's a nice quality of life thing, and it does change up what you can even do in the game.
Mhm.
So, for example, when I was learning the game, I was like, wow, I really can't do. Am I just not pressing it hard enough? And then I realized they were using the rapid fire buster button for weapons as well. So, for example, with Impact Man, if you're using the pile driver, you get more. You maintain your height better by using the rapid fire buster button. With Chain Blast, which is what brought the whole thing up, Blastman's weapon, you can fire all four, which is the maximum amount of shots you can have on the screen, really, really quickly if you use the rapid fire buster. If you don't, you really struggle to do that properly. And on Yellow Devil, you have to throw four out because that explosion not only deals a huge radius, but like maybe three times more damage than three bombs would do. For whatever reason,
Oh wow.
that additional bomb just chunks out so much more of his health. And so the fight involves just doing that a couple times and then using power gear bombs because those just come out instantly. And he blows up in like 30 seconds. And I guarantee you, most people who fight the Yellow Devil do not beat him in 30 seconds their first time.
Yeah, it's like one phase essentially, and then he does these little phases that didn't exist in 1, where he's smaller yellow devils running across the screen, and doesn't even get to the second try of his normal movement.
Well, that's because
really cool.
in this game he has the speed gear, so
Yeah.
it's changed up. But I mean, I remember that fight walling me off really hard in my casual playthrough because he doesn't really at least seem like he is vulnerable to any items in particular or any weapons in particular.
Mhm.
It seems
Mhm.
like your buster is going to be as good as anything else, and you're looking at probably four cycles in order to finish him off that way,
If
because
that, yeah.
every time you damage him, he instantly becomes invulnerable until the next entire phase starts. So you're doing such a small amount of damage, and you have to memorize his patterns because you take a ton of damage in his in-between phases.
You literally just defined Yellow Devil fight, which is like the way they designed those fights intentionally. I mean, Mega Man 8 does the same thing, even though it's completely different in terms of the mechanics of the fight. You know, he's only vulnerable for a short period of time. You only do a little damage. He does a lot. You have to memorize the pattern. Like, that's...
Sure. It's the classic experience.
Thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Casually, he's a really, really bad fight, but speedrun-wise, he's actually not that bad. But again, it relies on your blast weapon, and ammo is so important. In fact, if you accidentally use blast throughout that stage, even once, I'm afraid of being able to do the kill or not.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And is there anything interesting to note in terms of the Wily fight? Pup?
The other Wily fight, or the Wily himself, Wily 11, right?
Yeah, so what's interesting about the Wily fight in general in Mega Man 11?
First of all, that's the fight where acid is actually useful. Acid barrier and a number of other weapons briefly pause Mega Man in place, so he can't move while using them, which limits how useful they are. But acid barrier also doesn't really move away from Mega Man. In fact, the reason why it's damaging is because the barrier is more powerful, quote unquote, and it'll actually deal damage at that point on contact. So it's a fight that's actually really easy if you just keep damage boosting. You just keep taking damage, entering his hitbox, and activating a powered acid barrier, and he loses like half his health each time. So he dies really fast. It's actually kind of hilarious. Both phases are actually just like this. But the second phase is it's kind of a painful point for some runners because his movement is extremely random. He moves very quickly, and you're using health as a resource. So it's very scary because if you die, you lose quite a lot of time. That will immediately kill a run if you were to die on Wily.
Right. Yeah, you saw quite a few of those at Twitch Rivals where players went in there in good shape, but just random movements, not being able to line it up, taking damage without dealing damage, and it chunks you out one bit at a time until you're finally lost your run.
It's a pretty common mechanic in the Mega Man games to have Dr. Wily's last phase moving randomly in different spots of the screen that you can't predict, and really makes a lot of speedruns frustrating. I think Mega Man 4 ends in a similar way where you just don't, you're dealing with RNG, literally 98% of the way through the run, and that's frustrating for sure.
Well, thank goodness for Beat in Mega Man 5 that he can just target him.
The good news is that also, if you do decide to pick up this run, there's a whole variety of different things you can do. There's different difficulties that can be easier. Also, if you're not quite at this, Moo skill level yet, which is probably likely, you can use the shop, you can pick up some safety items. So this is a really cool game to learn. And I think the sense that you can ease your way into it a little bit easier than others due to the shop mechanics and the different difficulties. So definitely go check this run out. It's a lot of fun. The movement is really great. I mean, Mega Man games are known for their movement in general, but this one has especially interesting movement with this combination of weapons and how, as Moo said, quickly you can switch between them. Do you have a couple Mega Man 11 runners you recommend people go check out that are actively doing runs now?
Yeah, so I mentioned him a couple times before, Reebs. That's Reabs. He is a really chill dude. He's doing runs. There's Prizzy. Prizzy's a European. Prizzy's super awesome, very chill guy. He's a really strong runner too. He's got the lower 34s right now. There's Chelny, who is I see him quite often doing a lot of stage practice. He's oftentimes optimizing rooms, coming up with new strats. And I haven't seen Fasta doing runs recently, but he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. He will be doing runs, I know that. And then QTT, world record holder, also has been lately streaming the game. So definitely someone you want to watch. His movement is so clean.
Definitely.
We'll include links to a lot of those runners in our show notes. So
real fun to see some of these classic mega runners getting into a modern game with some definite slight changes for them that they're probably not used to, but still at the top of the leaderboard here. Some of those names, it's really cool. We're going to go ahead and take a break, listen to the one Mega Man 11 song that exists. Chad is literally going to kill me after this episode. And then, you'll get a new co-host and we'll do another podcast, but we'll be right back with your Q&A.
So, as this episode actually isn't being recorded live, we took a lot of these questions from our Discord server. Everyone was very kind to throw some awesome questions our way. And so let's get kicked off with the 3 best questions we got from Discord. We'll start off with Space Cow asking, has the 11th entry in the series changed Oth's opinions on Mega Man? John, do you want to answer this one? Yeah.
Wow, we had the same joke loaded up. That's great.
Yeah,
I'm
you
gonna
can't.
let you answer
You're
it.
not. You're not the only funny man this time. All right.
You're always the funniest man, bud.
So I would say that I've always enjoyed Mega Man games, not necessarily the classic ones, but the X series, specifically for me. And I would say that I think this game has given me an appreciation for some of the classic Mega Man games. This game is really tight, really fun. The hater is reformed, I think is probably the best answer.
I think that I don't know where else to say this, but I think if they were to reboot a classic Mega Man game, they should be rebooting Mega Man Soccer. So I hope that's coming up soon.
Whoa.
Tell me you're not all in on that.
Big agree.
Big agree.
I probably, of all the Mega Man games in existence, I probably spent the most hours on Mega Man Soccer, and that's not a joke for the podcast or anything like that. Growing up, I had Mega Man Soccer, and I played that with my cousin a lot. I have a lot of opinions about that game. Very good game.
I really wanted to speedrun it at some point, but it is not a fun speedrun, so as you could expect. Yeah,
Mega Man Soccer.
It's a good game. Let's re-release it. Let's do it. With anime cutscenes and voice acting, please. Our second question comes from
You can't block man.
Blockman's obviously got to be the goalie. There's no question.
For sure.
There's no question.
All right, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
No, you're good. JNitch87 asks, how is speedrunning Mega Man 11 different or similar to running the older classic Mega Man games? Now, Moo, you haven't run classic Mega Man games, but you had an answer to this, so I want to hear it.
So when I look at the older Mega Man games, the similarities that it has is it brings back sliding. It still has Charge Buster, and it has the weapon variety where you want to use certain weapons in certain spots. It brings back Rush Jet and Rush Coil. So those are things that make it similar to older Mega Man speed games. But what sets it apart, in my opinion, is the fact that you don't have to bring up the pause menu to change the weapon. That allows you to make a lot of on-the-fly decisions. You get to make much more complicated strats. You get to put together weapon combinations that just wouldn't be optimal or worth going for if you had to constantly pause the game, which does 2 things. Being able to pause the game and change your weapon like that makes a strat easier because you obviously have all that buffer time to do something. So having to do it in real time is a lot scarier. It's a lot more tense, but it's also very exciting. You feel super strong knowing you can just on the fly, boom, you swap your weapon. If you look at Mega Man going through some of these rooms, you look at him like he's a beast. He's just destroying everything. And especially in the later stages, you just have so many weapons at your command. So I feel like from the perspective of like how empowering it is, that's great. And then from how complex it is, like the skill ceiling for this game is just, it's so high. I never feel like I can really go hard enough on the game. It's definitely something I recommend if you like trying something that's finger gymnastics. Is one way I would put it.
This really makes me think how much I would enjoy watching a re-release of some of the classic Mega Man games for the Switch, adding in this quick switch mechanic. I think just adding that in by itself would be really fascinating to see how strats really change when you don't have to pause to change weapons, and see whether or not you get gameplay that is similar to this kind of gameplay where you're just 6 different weapons in a room because that's the right way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say, I mean, this isn't all classic Mega Man games. I would actually half, but this run is very movement based, which all of them are, but there's no huge tricks. It doesn't seem that like the run hinges on. It's more like tiny optimizations throughout. Whereas, something like Mega Man 2 or 1 have a lot of these zips or glitches that you have to execute at a high level in order to, make sure you get a run off the ground. This, because the main category is no out of bounds, doesn't deal with that quite as much, it seems.
Sure.
It's a lot of what you see is what you get.
Sure.
We also got a question here from Sharif, who you can check out at GDQ, by the way. He's going to be running Dragon's Lair for the Game Boy.
Wow.
Commentary, so that's going to be fun during Awful Games block. But he asks, which robot power is the most useless?
And I'm going to jump in and say you're not allowed to say Acid Bubble, because it's only useful against Wily, but that's an unfair cop-out answer.
The whole point of the game is to fight Wily. It's the most useful.
I
You're
gotta
not trying to
agree with
stop
John.
Met Hat Man. You're trying to stop Dr. Wily from killing the world.
That's fair.
Even if I wanted to argue that acid is the most useless weapon, it really isn't, because your definition of what useful is kind of depends on how you're playing the game. I think being able to ignore projectiles is huge in that game.
Sure.
But yeah, I honestly can't say a weapon is the most useless in that regard at all. They all have a specific use, and that's cool. No two weapons are so similar that I would. Sorry, Scramble Thunder.
Yeah. No, none of them
I
are
had
so
to-
similar you can't use them. Yeah, like that.
Scramble Thunder is the only
Oh.
weapon that kind of, but even that weapon's useful. Like otherwise, it pauses you in the air. You can use it as kind of like a safety net to kind of give you a moment to think. It traces around the ground. No other weapon does that. It's just the way we use it in the speed run. I would say that it's interchangeable enough with blast that you're just going to be using blast. But otherwise, like every weapon has a great use.
But in casual play, you would say all of them kind of have their own use as well.
Totally.
I definitely use Scramble Thunder a lot. In situations where I wanted to hit an enemy that was like high up on a platform, I would send it along the floor and up the wall to attack them. So
That's always nice, and I do think that's a highlight of good game design as well, because a lot of the Mega Man games in the past have struggled with making a lot of power-ups that were pretty much not of value to you, even from a casual perspective. I mean, from a speedrun perspective, they obviously can't determine what's going to be useful and what's not, but you know, a lot of times it's very clear, okay, I'm going to use these 2 or 3 items, so it's cool that they did a good job of adding value each boss.
I think it's fascinating that the bounce man ability, I don't know what it's called, the rubber balls that bounce around.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how much use that gets in the speedrun, considering how random it seems to actually be.
It seems like a ball to use for sure.
I mean, that was a reach.
Surprisingly, bounce covers such a wide variety of angles that it's very useful in a couple rooms. Some runners do and don't use it, and that kind of goes back on like for the most part, there's an optimal route in this game.
Right.
If you look at the top 3 times, everyone does the same stage order. But again, Reeves, kind of like that, he's that outlier. He does crazy things. He does bounce before block, which means he has that weapon to use in that stage. And to me, in general, with runs, one of the cool things is that once you've beaten 4 stages, you have enough weapons that the gameplay spices up quite a lot.
I mean, it seems like a really well-rounded weapon for sure.
Shut up, John. Just shut up. I do want to say, we've mentioned Reeves so many times that I would be remiss if I didn't mention one interesting bit of trivia about Reeves, and that's that very often when he learns a new speedrun, he will do 100 no reset runs of it before he really starts to get into any grinding mentality. That's sort of his approach to learning games, at least for a number of games that he's done, and he did this with Mega Man 11. He did his first 99 no reset runs up to Twitch Rivals and made his 100th no reset run the first run he did of the Twitch Rivals event, which is kind of a neat milestone. Like, he kicked off the event with his final, like, now I'm allowed to grind. So
That would have stunk if he like found out he put like 98 twice or something.
yeah, John, that would have stunk.
So that is our Mega Man 11 episode. Hope you did. Sure. Moo, can you tell them again where they can find you if they want to see you doing this? Maybe some Spectre Night, maybe some other cool games you're telling me about.
So you can find me on twitch.tv/MooMooAkai. And if you want to see me on Twitter, I mean, I post things there occasionally. That's at MooMooStrats. That's also my YouTube at MooMooStrats, where I have, and this is something I try to do as often as I can. I put up guides for games. I put one up for Mega Man 11. Yeah, so if you want to use that as a way of entering the game, supplement your learning with it, I want that to be a tool for people, because I don't want games to be like, oh, I definitely can't do that. No, please try. Come in. Here are some strats you can use. You know, get you on the ground and started. See where
That's
it takes
really,
you.
really awesome.
That's great. Go
We
check
need
that
more
out.
of that.
Definitely give him follows. We do love tutorials and linking to content that can get people involved. So we'll also try and post that on our Twitter or in the show notes if you are interested in learning the run. What about you, Chad? Where could they find you?
You can find me on twitch.tv/AuthorBlues, YouTube as AuthorBlues. You can find me on Twitter as AuthorBlues. We got the whole franchise at this point, so really just pick your poison. How about you, John?
First, I just want to say I'm sorry about the puns. I know that's been tough on you, but you know what? You rock, man. We've got to roll this thing out, but I just wanted to let you know that. So
I
before
quit.
we
I
beat
quit. I quit.
Before we beat it, I'm just trying to not be,
Quit.
Go through this, auto and actually.
I'm done with this podcast. This is the last episode I will ever do.
You can find me at John Carls on Twitter and Twitch, and John Carls1 on YouTube. You can find us at theframesavers.com. It has links to all of our content on our Twitch, our Discord. If you want to ask us questions, you can go there. You can check out our Twitter. That's where we post when we go live and when we post new episodes. So definitely check out all of those links. We also want to give a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters. You can support us at patreon.com/theframesavers. That helps us pay for our hosting fees and other editing, all kinds of stuff that we get to do, buying stickers for you for GDQ, other fun things. Shout outs to our $25 a month patrons, Tina Hacks, Mr. Pizak, Kip with 2 P's, Toasted Muffin Gaming, and Kevin Hummert. You can follow them all on Twitch except for Kevin Hummert. He just lives at Kevin Hummert's house, so go check him out there. If you pay $1 a month, you can actually get access to all of our show notes, and we're also trying to do a good job of putting hyperlinks at the bottom of that to give you links to where we're finding all our different stuff, whether it be just finding the manual or different interviews we maybe read or reviews that we find online. We are trying to push to get to $300 a month, and we will do an episode on Symphony of the Night, which Chad and I have not played. We're getting really close. I think we're only $35-$36 off a month, so make us play that game. That'll be a lot of fun. Also, shout outs as always to the Warp World podcast. We are part of the Warp World Podcast Network, which is now 4 podcasts deep. We've got Warp World Historians, this podcast, and I Got One. Is it I Got One?
Yep.
Yeah. So all awesome podcasts. Definitely check them out. They are also working on a whole variety of awesome tools. I'm sure you've seen stuff about crowd control. We should probably maybe do a pocket about that or something. But if you don't know about crowd control, go find it. It's really cool. But we just want to say thanks to our Warp World friends for allowing us to be part of their network, and for Brian Morthaler, as always, for producing this at Morse TV, at Twitter and Twitch. Any last thoughts, Chad?
Yeah, I'm done with this podcast.
Okay,
I'm
so
out.
if you are looking to apply to be my new podcast,
Wait, why do you get to keep the podcast? I'm kidding. Oh wait, no, I did say I was quitting. I didn't. Oh
quit.
man.
I didn't quit. I don't think you know how jobs work. But we are very grateful for you all. We are hoping that this 2019 starts out well. This will be posting January 2nd, so we're excited to do a whole nother year with you all. And until the next episode, go play some video games.
Peace.
See you.